All right, so my name is Dustin. I am from a company called Museum Hack. We are based in New York City. And so my goal for the next 30 minutes or so is to kind of model out and talk about what we do, as well as ideally give you guys some little bits from our toolkit so that you can steal and put into practice in your institutions when you get back home after this conference. So Museum Hack started about 3 years ago. My boss, Nick Gray, started giving renegade, offbeat, interactive museum adventure tours to his friends at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Shortly thereafter, I joined in, starting our science programming across the park at the Museum of Natural History. And the reason why we started doing these not sanctioned, definitely renegade tours of these amazing, huge cultural institutions in New York City is because when we looked around, we didn't see ourselves in the museum. And so in museums in general, we talk a lot about community. And so when we think about community at Museum Hack, we define it as our peers, most specifically millennials. People in the about 20 to 35-year-old age demographic. Generally speaking, museums do a great job when it comes to school groups, when it comes to family programs, when it comes to slightly older audiences that are already bought into the museum experience. But when we looked around, we didn't see our friends at the museums that we love so much. A lot of times in New York City, I don't know if we take them for granted, but all right, we'll go with most. Most people my age in New York City kind of see these huge cultural institutions as tourist traps, or maybe places you go on the weekend when your parents are in town. We thought that was kind of ridiculous. We wanted to go about changing that. So we started to try to do just that. So on our tours, we do a few different things that I want to talk about in a moment, many of which capitalize on smartphones. We'll get to that again in a second. So again, we are based first in New York City at the Met. Shortly thereafter, we expanded across the park to the American Museum of Natural History. And now we do tours at the De Young in San Francisco, the National Gallery in DC, as well as starting September 1st, which is, according to my watch, a little over a month ago, at the Art Institute in Chicago. So I know we have a lot of Chicagoans here today. And so when we do our events, our tours, I don't even like to call them tours because I think generally when people hear the phrase museum tour, there's already a preconceived notion about what that is. And generally the audiences that we're trying to get in the door, which are ones that aren't already coming to the museum, the traditional or the stereotypical museum tour, however they want to define that, isn't something that really speaks to them. So we took a long, hard look at what that is and how we could do it better. So when we say hack, when we say museum hack, we don't mean people like in hoodies in a basement getting into mainframes, messing up email servers. We think of hack as knowing the constituent parts of something so well that you can reorganize them to better suit your needs. So we know and love these huge museums so much, we want to reorganize what it means to be engaged and to go on a tour within this space to meet our goal. And our goal is simply to get, well, really we have two goals, two objectives in Museum Hack. One, get new people in the door. It's as simple as that. It started with almost only millennials. As time has gone on, our average tour now, instead of being, I should mention, our tours cap at about 8 people. We keep the group size pretty low. We'll talk about that in a little bit. At the beginning, it was almost exclusively young New Yorkers. As time has gone on, the average tour now is 4 to 6 young New Yorkers and maybe a couple on vacation from somewhere or a couple from out of the country who maybe heard about us on TripAdvisor. So again, objective number 1 is to get new audiences in the door. Objective number 2 is simply to get people to love the museum as much as we do. Like full stop. New people in the door, get them to love the space. Those are our 2 main objectives. And so we do that in a few different ways, but I always argue that our tours are predicated upon 3 different things. I'm gonna do a little spin here, get that wire out of the way. 3 different things. 1, tremendous storytelling. So we think long and hard, and we do a lot of training as to how you tell a tremendous narrative. Narratives that get buy-in, that show people how the things in these amazing collections, which often display thousands, if not millions of years of art, history, science, and culture, are relevant to their lives and their personal interests. How do you weave in mind-blowing facts, things that people are going to remember and immediately want to share out? How do you use language, often slightly off-color language, to really make a story come to life? So we think a lot about how we tell stories, but we're not the only good storytellers. I imagine many of you are great at telling stories as I'm sure many of the people that work in your institutions. But the things that I think we do really well are really this second one. We'll get to the third in a minute. And that's we try to give everyone that comes on a Museum Hack tour a fair amount of agency within their experience. In my experience, for the most part, and this is definitely changing, in the tech sector of museums, most museum experiences are unilateral deliveries of information. We talked a little bit about this in the keynote, where you have that top-down model. The museum is kind of the arbiter, the fount of knowledge. You should come here, here's what's important, here's what we want you to leave thinking about. So we think a lot about how do we flip that on its head and give people that come on our tours chance to be meaning makers. We want people to actively participate in creation meaning. So it's not simply the tour guide saying, here's what's important, here's what you know. We want to figure out what people are into and meet them at their level and talk about things that they're passionate about. And so by giving people agency, we allow them to take a little bit of ownership over the experience in a way that we think really gets long-term buy-in and gets people want to come back and experience the museum again, either by themselves or with their family or friends. Tangible takeaways are huge too. Like literally giving someone a physical keepsake from their experience to tie them to the great time they had and to the institution has been huge for us. It's silly, sometimes it's stupid, it's very cheeky, but it works. And we'll get to that in a sec. And so for these second two, we use phones a lot. I mean, most of you right now have your phone literally in your hand. If not, so the people that come through the doors of all of our institutions, we now know have that phone, if not in their pocket, in their hand their entire time. And thankfully, over the course of probably the last 3 to 5 years, that kind of prevailing notion of like put your phone away that's distracting from your experience has kind of started to switch in, I think, a great way to why don't we actually use that as a tool for engagement? If you're going to have it in your hand, why don't we try to figure out a way we can use that to forge a social experience amongst the people in the museum or on the tour, as well as using that to get people to look closer at pieces of art or things in a science museum or maybe even the space itself. So we use phones a lot. And so my objective now for the next 20 minutes or so is kind of walk you guys through parts of what a tour would look like and key on how we use phones. So the first thing I should mention, if this will work. Oh, it's not working now? Great. Cool. I was hoping this would just stop working midway. That was part of the plan. All right, so you show up at the Met, for instance, and you meet your guide. So like I mentioned, tour groups are never more than 8 people. Anytime there's more than 8 people on a tour, a second guide is assigned. Keeps the ratio low. If we want to actually try stuff out and do games and activities that give people agency, it's incredibly hard to facilitate that when you have a huge group. So right here, down in the bottom left, that's Sharang. Over in the bottom right, that's Leah. Those are 2 guides on this. I believe this is a corporate tour. We can talk about that a little bit later. So the very first thing you do on a museum hack tour, after you meet your guide, is we all put our hands in the middle, and we go down on Mu, up on Zeum, and we blow it up like a sports team, which is fucking ridiculous. But we do this, and a lot of the things we do are kind of patently ridiculous, but they are done for very specific reasons. So right from the get-go, by doing this, we're first totally like dismissing of your notion of what you should expect from a museum tour. I assume none of you have done a sports cheer at the beginning of a museum event. Probably not, right? So it breaks your preconceived notion of what this is going to be like. It kind of shows this is going to be a little weird, it's going to be a little bit different, but even most importantly, it shows that it's not just about the guide. We are on this adventure together for the next 2 hours. I'm going to ask you guys to do some stuff. We're going to play some games. We're going to get a little weird. We're going to talk about some gossip. It's going to be different, and it's going to be about all of us together exploring this museum as a social unit rather than simply one guide talking at people the entire time. So we do this at the beginning, kind of set that expectation. It's also very important. In order to do a lot of the games and activities that I'm going to talk about in a minute, you have to get buy-in, and it takes time to build that up. So some of the more involved games and activities I'll talk about, I won't do for an hour and a half into a tour. Our tours are generally about 2 hours long. Because we want to scaffold the experience so that people feel comfortable to do this stuff that we ask them to do when we give them prompts and we give them context to do certain activities. Because if we haven't built up to that and gotten buy-in and set up a cohesive social unit, it's a non-starter. So I think this is a really, really important thing to do. Obviously, we're not using technology for this, but it sets up the tone for things we're going to do a little bit later on. Let me see if this clicker works again. We're just going to forget that. All right, so has anyone ever seen this? You have. Awesome. So, I have started to do tours of the Met, which is crazy. My background is in evolutionary biology. I started a tour program at the Museum of Natural History. And over the course of 2 years, I have absolutely fallen in love with the Met, almost exclusively because of the people I work with, because of the passion and the knowledge of the people that I work with for this museum. And so I get to help lead tours of the Met as well. And during my tours, usually this is the first thing we stop at. There is a case, not so far into the Met, that's just filled with a bunch of frilly golden German shit. And so I go to this case, and I have people do a quick lap, and I'm like, listen, pretend this is German IKEA, 16th, 17th century. You can take one thing home to your kitchen. What are you going to take? So this is in there. By the way, I should mention it's about yay big, about 1.5 feet tall. There are a bunch of different golden chalices, mugs. There's basically a Rubik's Cube drinking game in there. It's crazy. It's like you have to turn certain compartments of the mug in a certain way, otherwise the liquid won't come out. So I have people choose what they want from this case. Inevitably, someone chooses this, which is a great choice. because this is built by Johann Fries in 17th century Germany, and this is a gold frilly drinking game. I saw like 3 heads be like, what? So this is a depiction of Diana and the stag from Greek mythology. As the story goes, Diana is the goddess of the hunt. She was bathing out in like a little pond in the woods, and Actaeon, the great hunter, stumbled upon her. And pro tip, if you see a goddess bathing nude anywhere, you should just get the hell out of there, because if you don't, she may turn you into a stag, ride you around all day until you're so exhausted that you can't defend yourself, and then set your own hunting dogs upon you to kill and eat you alive. Eat and kill? You get the idea. Pretty gruesome story. But that's what this is a depiction of. But even better, it is an automaton. It is a drinking game. So what happens is, if you actually look up at the top, the antlers of the stag unscrew, and then you fill the entire body with your liquor of choice. The time it probably would have been brandy. After you fill it with the liquor of choice, you screw the head back on. Down in the bottom, there's a little circle. There's a little button there that pops off. You stick a key in there, you turn it, and now this thing chugs, and I do mean chug, like a choo-choo train, in a 5-point star around the table. And whoever it stops in front of, yeah, you have to chug again, yay big, you have to chug the entire thing. And then they fill it up and you go again. And this was actually owned by J.P. Morgan. It was donated to the museum in 1917. So like he took this out for his finance bro parties. This is the most baller iteration of a red Solo cup I've ever seen. And so for me, I say this is the most down-to-party thing in the entire Metropolitan Museum of Art. There are over 200,000 objects on display here. There's 2.3 million square feet. We can't see everything. But I want you guys to keep your eyes peeled, because we're going to walk pretty quickly past literally hundreds and thousands of amazing things from hundreds of thousands of years. I want you guys to find the one thing that to you is the most down-to-party. It can be something you'd bring to a party. It can be a space you want to party in. It can be a person you want to bring to a party. Say, take a photo of it. At the end of the tour, we all circle up, and everyone has 10 seconds to defend their photo as the most down-to-party thing in the entire Metropolitan Museum of Art. Hilarity always ensues, and we always give out a tangible prize. This is Ethan, my colleague, handing out literally an art medal. It just says art on the medal, which I find hilarious. We give out a tangible prize for whoever we deem to have found the most down-to-party thing in the entire Metropolitan Museum of Art. And so we do this to kind of set up at the beginning, like, A, we can't say everything. B, I don't want to quell your curiosity. I want to give you guys a chance to always be looking around for things you want to come back and see later. And it gives people kind of permission right from the get-go to be on their phones and to use them. We give people the Wi-Fi password of the museum. We tell them, listen, however you use your phone outside the museum, do so in here as well. But we've set up this context to ideally have people practice high levels of noticing, which is a bullshit phrase I made up, while they're on our museum experience. So that's one way, and that's a tour-long photo challenge. So we set that up at the beginning. We give little reminders throughout, and we capitalize on the end. So that's one way you use the phones. A second game that we play, this is more specific in one gallery. You can do this in a portrait gallery. I've done this at the American Museum of Natural History in the Hall of Biodiversity. You can do this with animals. It's called Matchmaker. So I'll have people go into a portrait gallery, and I will say, take 1 minute, find a face that speaks to you. Not literally, that'd be weird. But figuratively. Just a face you gravitate towards. It can be a human, it can be an animal. Take a photo of it. Everyone in the group takes a photo. We meet back in the middle of the hall. I randomly pair people up, and now they have 2 minutes to come up with the epic love story that brought their two people together. They have to name them. Doesn't have to be the real name. They can make it up. They have to name them. They have to say how they met, and they have to say where they are now. They have about 2 minutes. Often, depending on how well the group is kind of gelling, sometimes I'll randomly pair people that didn't know each other. If not so much, maybe people that came together or families. And it's a really simple, cheeky prompt to get people to gravitate towards a specific thing and to start thinking more about it. Because we want people in a gallery, we want people to go and find something that they like. We want them to gravitate towards it. We want them to look at it. We want them to study it. We want to have them compare and contrast with something nearby. We want them to take a photo of it. We want them to share their story or their information about it, real or otherwise, with their friends. We want them to share it online. We want them to want to come back and learn more about this space. But if we say that, it's a non-starter. If we want people to do all that stuff. So instead, we set up this silly, cheeky photo opportunity that gives them agency within their experience. I'm not telling them what picture or what painting to go find. I'm not telling them who it's by, why it's important. I'm not breaking down the brushstrokes. I'm letting people gravitate towards something they like and then simply make up a story and work together with someone else. And so now maybe they're comparing and contrasting two different faces and two different paintings they may otherwise never have put together. And they're actually doing something that could end up being a multi-million-dollar movie. Who here has seen The Girl with the Pearl Earring? Yes, which was a book, The Girl with the Pearl Earring, by Tracy Chevalier. And I read an interview with her, and it was like, oh, you must love museums, you must love art. And she's like, no, my feet hurt, and I don't know anything about the art. So generally when I go to a museum, I'll just walk into a portrait gallery and just walk up to a painting that I like and just make up a story. And that's exactly what she did for that movie. I'm sorry, for that book that then became a movie. So we have people do this for that exact same reason, to give them a little chance to have some agency in figuring out what they want to talk about and what they gravitate towards. And this is a hall in the American Wing at the Met, if anyone's been there. There's a bunch of guys that are not founding fathers, but may look like it, and they're all like holding up weird gang signs. So this is often a very popular hall for this. Okay. Yes. We also think a lot about how do we get people physically and kinesthetically involved in the museum. I can't, unfortunately, climb the dinosaur. I can't pet the art. So what is a way I can get my body involved? And also to kind of like keep the energy up. Our tours are about 2 hours long, and so we think of them kind of as a roller coaster. We want to have ebbs and flows. We want people to have high energy, low energy, time for like contemplative thinking, as well as, well, being ridiculous. So this is an activity we call tableau vivant, which translates literally to living picture. How am I doing on time? Okay. And so 100 years ago, if you went to the Louvre, you would go, you'd see some amazing art, you'd come back, you'd be like, oh, let me show you my iPhoto slideshow. But that didn't exist 100 years ago, so instead you would literally take people at your dinner party and have them reenact the art scenes you saw. And so we do this in the museum for a number of reasons. One, it gets people physically involved. Two, it turns into amazing photo ops, which we'll get back to in a second. But you can bet if you have to position yourself and a friend as a painting or as a sculpture, you're going to look longer and harder at that than you would if you were just to look at it and take a photo or to walk by. We have people who work together oftentimes. Sometimes someone will just assign themselves as the cinematographer to kind of outline how the picture is going to look, put people into place. And it's a great way to have people work together to recreate art and to make amazing photo opportunities. Because we recognize when you set up cheeky photo ops that allow people ultimately to determine what the photo is going to look like and how they want to take it and who's going to take it and how they're going to position themselves. These photos, without prompting, end up all over social media, and they act as great marketing not just for us, but for the institution as well. And it's not me saying, I've been to museums, and I hope I'm not offending anyone here, but I've been to museums that have a wall that will say, take your selfie here, and it has like the hashtag above it, and it's like, no, don't tell me how to take my selfie. And so these are really fun ways to give people agency to use their phones to explore the space in a physical way. And it works at naturalistic museums as well. This is actually a teachable moment. Next time you guys do a T-Rex impersonation, T-Rex were actually clappers, not slappers. So turn your wrists in to make your T-Rex impersonation anatomically correct. Just saying. Oh, sidebar, who here has gotten a dinosaur from me while you've been here? Only a couple of you guys. Okay. I have lots more dinosaurs. Just throwing that out there. All right, so this is at the Museum of Natural History. I should also mention name tags. I was against this at first. I thought it was weird. I show up at a museum I haven't been with a complete stranger as a tour guide, and then I'm branded with my name, and it says Museum Hack in the bottom. I was like, that's a little weird. Try it once. It really adds to the group cohesion, being able to talk to people by their actual name, having them be able to talk to each other, and not having to be like, oh, hey, guy, you. Try it once. If it's not for you, scrap it. We have a saying at Museum Hack, there is no failure, only feedback. And like me, as a museum educator at heart, it's been tremendously professionally rewarding for me to be in a space where I can just try stuff out and iterate very quickly and see what works and see what doesn't work when it comes to engagement. I always want to ask this question because I'm always curious to see the actual number of hands. Who here in their museum has been in a meeting to set up a meeting? Okay, cool. All right. It's not just me. All right, so I don't just give these tiny toy dinosaurs out at conferences for stupid networking reasons. We actually use these on tour. So at the Museum of Natural History, about an hour and a half into our tour, we get up to the fossil halls. And I joke as we're going up that everyone on the tour is going to receive an honorary degree as a Museum Hack dinosaur scientist. And in order to get that degree, you obviously have to go on a fossil hunt. So before we enter the last fossil hall, everyone on the tour receives their very own tiny toy dinosaur. And they're given 3 objectives. So I tell them every one of these dinosaurs is the actual large fossilized specimen is in the next hall. So you have 3 objectives. 1, find your dinosaur. It's a fossil hunt. Obviously, you got to find your dinosaur. 2, in order to prove you found your dinosaur, you must take a dino selfie, which again is patently ridiculous, but a lot harder to pull off than it sounds. These are very large animals. It really makes you consider the size and the scope of them. So 1, find a dinosaur. 2, dino selfie. 3, learn one thing about it. It can be as simple as what its name is. So I give people about 7 or 8 minutes. They explore around. They find their dinosaur. They take their dino selfie. They learn one thing about it. Then we meet back up and share out. So the dino selfies themselves are pretty great. Again, these also we find all over social media without prompting. I get pictures from friends who've been on tours at other museums that are now doing dino selfies. Oh, there we go. Yeah. And so it's just a very silly context to give people, again, a chance to take some agency within their learning. So I'm not going through the hall and I'm not saying, this is the one thing I want you to know about. Here's what's important. Let me tell you about it. They're not just breezing through by themselves, looking at one thing, looking at another, taking a photo. I've given them a tangible thing that's tying to them to a specific thing within the collection. So they have that physical dinosaur in their hand. I'm asking them to take a photo keepsake of it that gets them physically involved in a way they might not otherwise do. And then I just implore them to learn one thing about it. And so now we've given them a small context to take ownership over their own learning that includes using their phone, that includes this tangible takeaway. And again, these photos all over social media without prompting. And so this was one of the most fun things I do for sure. And I see people really light up. But again, this is something, talked about scaffolding a little bit earlier, this is not something I would do until an hour and a half in. Because I'm giving something to someone, I'm having them leave, I'm asking them to do a specific thing, I'm hoping they come back after a certain amount of time, I'm having them share out in front of the group. It's a big ask, and you have to build up to getting to a point where you can expect this from your group. So a moment ago I showed you guys that photo with the name tags and the T-Rex fingers. So I take that photo because it's, do that again? Where are we at? Oh, I thought you were giving me oh, never mind. I thought that was like the red light, you're done. Okay. Where was I? Photo, yes. So in front of the T-Rex, it's a great photo spot, and I'm like, oh, I grouped the people who came together. Like, I'm not going to post this anywhere. You'll see why I'm taking it in a little bit. So we take that photo, and while they're out exploring the fossil hall in that 7 minutes, I have an Instax wireless digital printer. It's literally about yay big, and it creates a wireless connection with my phone, and then I shoot the photos I took to my phone, and I print out one of these for every single person that comes on a tour. So everyone that comes on a Museum Hack tour gets this Polaroid, it's made by Fuji now, not Polaroid, to go home with them, both at the Met and at the Museum of Natural History. And people absolutely love these because it's a great kind of throwback to Polaroid. So if you're a little bit older, you're like, oh, Polaroids, I haven't seen these in a while. These are great. And if you're a millennial, you're like, oh my God, I printed out a photo? Who even does that? Like, I don't know the last time I printed out a photo. And so it works across demographics, and it gives people, again, a tangible thing to tie them to their experience. And then, again, we see photos of these photos all over social media. So with all that being said, I'm almost done. I want to give you guys, I guess it's not a tangible takeaway, but one takeaway. That is, if and when any of you are in New York City, that is my email address. Send me an email because I want you to come on my tour, and I want you to give me feedback. Because I absolutely 100% believe that the best feedback and the best info that I get about what we're doing comes from other museum people. Because honestly, I mean, as everyone in this conference knows, this is my first MCN. It's been amazing. The energy is awesome. I feel like the best founts of information and the people that are going to make you better at your practice are literally in this room right now. So if and when you're in New York, send me an email. I'll get you a ticket. Come on my tour as long as you agree to have coffee afterwards and talk about it. And I wasn't lying when I say I still have a ton of dinosaurs. I don't want to carry these back to New York. Find me. I will give you a dinosaur. Thank you, guys. Okay. How long do we have? 5 minutes. All right. Who wants to talk about what? Questions, thoughts, sir? Yes. Great question. What's the relationship with the institution? So we wouldn't be where we are had we asked for permission. We're definitely in the camp of asking for forgiveness rather than permission. So we did tours for about 6 to 8 months, and then at both these major institutions in New York, we basically got the same email from group services saying we are now aware you're doing tours and that they're successful. We would like you to buy tickets through group sales from now on. So now we buy our tickets in advance from the museum. I should mention our tours are not cheap, but built into the cost of the tour is the full suggested donation to both the Met and the Museum of Natural History. Both of them are suggested donation institutions. I can go and I can pay a penny, but when you buy your Museum Hack ticket, full admission cost to the museum is built in, so that goes right back to the museum. When people ask, like, do the museum like what you're doing? Are they okay with it? Well, one, we're bringing in audiences that otherwise wouldn't come. And I'm not just saying that. anecdotally, when you buy your ticket online prior to going, we ask 3 questions. Are you bringing any kids? What name do you want on your name tag? And have you ever been to the museum before? In 2015, 49.8% of people that came on a Museum Hack tour had never been to the museum. So exactly half, basically, which is awesome, because it says that there is a huge demographic that we're reaching that otherwise wasn't coming, and people are also willing to pay a premium. Those that have already come are willing to pay a premium for this different type of experience. So we're making the museum money, and we're bringing new audiences in the door. Yes? We don't have like just a millennial tour. It's just the tour, and generally speaking, it's geared towards millennials, but we get tons of people from all ages and all backgrounds. Did you have a question? Yes.
Yeah, you said earlier that a good portion of your demographics were actually local. So out of those 49%, how many are local New Yorkers and the rest international?
Great question. I have no idea. That's a really good question. Yeah, I want to find that out. No one's ever asked that. Thank you. He was wondering how much, so if we have 49.8% of people coming are new to the museum, what percentage of those are local versus people that have come from out of town? Yes?
So I'm guessing since people are paying premium, they will want naturally be engaged, but how do you deal with audiences that do not want?
So the people that come on our tours are generally pretty self-selected. Our marketing is pretty ridiculous. If I gave anyone a postcard, you know that. So generally people know what they're getting into, but a lot of times someone is brought by a family member or on a date and they're like, whoa, what is happening? And I'm sure it's happened in anyone else's programs. You have people that just aren't really down to party in the way that you are trying to, and that's fine. It's all right, yes? Absolutely. We don't hire people specifically for museum or art or science backgrounds. There are a fair amount of us who have those, but we hire first for people that are passionate and enthusiastic. You have to be the cruise ship director for a 2-hour museum experience. You have to be a big, engaging personality that's going to be able to manage that group and get buy-in. So we hire first for people that can do that, and then we give people paid time to do research, to shadow a ton of tours, to learn as much about the museum and the content as possible. That being said, we do have people that have art history and science backgrounds, but that's not the first thing we look for. 2 more questions? 1 and then 1. Yes? Yes. We do some theme tours as well. We do a Badass Bitches of the Met, which is a feminist tour. We do bachelorette parties. We've done a lot of corporate tours, which are weird, fun things. I'm just going to leave it at that. Yes, last question. Sometimes. I mean, I 100% understand that we get to choose what we're talking about, and because we're not of the museum, we're working in it, and it's supposed to be a fun, ridiculous time, I'm not going to gravitate towards heavy topics, but they come up, and I think it's just about having a human conversation. I start the meeting saying, I'm not an expert on most things in here. You may know more than I do about this topic, but let's set up a social context that makes everyone feel comfortable having a conversation about it. Cool. Thank you, guys.